The ancient wolves surrounded the rejected Omega. Then they did what no Alpha had ever seen. Hello, everyone. Sometimes the cruelest rejection does not come from someone who hates you. It comes from someone who once made you believe you were safe with them. If stories about courage, dignity, and unexpected destiny speak to you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support helps our channel grow. Now, come with me to Cedar Hollow, where 22-year-old Mara Whitcomb was about to lose something far more painful than a mate. Moonlight spilled across the ceremonial clearing, turning the ancient mating arch almost white. Cedar Hollow had gathered beneath it while Mara stood alone at its center, one hand resting over the crescent-shaped rowan pendant hidden beneath her dress. Her mother had left it to her. Tonight, she needed its familiar weight. Grant Holloway faced her across the circle. Tall, handsome, already treated like the future alpha he would someday become. He had known Mara most of her life. When they were children, he had walked her home through winter storms. Once, when she was 12 and frightened by thunder, he had sat outside June Whitcomb's cottage until the rain stopped because Mara had been too embarrassed to admit she wanted him to stay. She had remembered those things when their mate bond awakened. Apparently, Grant had remembered something else. Her weakness. Mara's wolf had never completed a full shift. Healers had examined her. Elders had whispered. Other wolves had learned to lower their voices whenever she entered a room. Grant knew how deeply that shame lived inside her. That was why, when Elder Warren raised his ceremonial staff, Mara searched Grant's face for the boy who had once protected her from it. Grant Holloway, the bond has awakened between you. Do you accept Mara Whitcomb as your mate? Grant did not answer immediately. His eyes shifted past her toward Vanessa Caldwell, the beta's elegant daughter, waiting among the gathered wolves in pale blue. Then Mara noticed something small. Grant rubbed his thumb against the side of his forefinger. He had done that as a boy whenever he was hiding something. Mara's stomach dropped. He had not decided tonight. He had come here already knowing. No, Grant said. The clearing seemed to contract around her. He finally met her eyes. I reject Mara Whitcomb as my mate. Whispers moved through the crowd. Mara barely heard them. She was staring at the man who had allowed her to stand beneath this arch hoping for a future he had already chosen to deny her. Elder Warren's expression tightened. Mara, you may answer. Her throat refused to work. Behind the gathering, June stood rigid, grief visible in her weathered face. Mara touched the pendant again. Grant lowered his voice. I'm doing what's best for Cedar Hollow. There it was. Not cruelty. Something worse. He had turned her into a sacrifice he could call responsibility. Mara breathed through the tearing ache beneath her ribs. Then I accept your rejection. The bond broke. Pain flashed through her chest so violently that her knees nearly failed. She remained standing. Grant reached toward her on instinct. Mara stepped back before he could touch her. For the first time that evening, uncertainty crossed his face. She did not stay to comfort him for hurting her. Mara walked beneath the mating arch and through the wolves who silently opened a path. At the edge of the clearing, June reached for her hand. Mara squeezed her grandmother's fingers. I need a minute. June understood and let her go. Mara continued toward the northern tree line until torchlight weakened behind her. Only there did she press a trembling hand over her heart. She had spent years believing her incomplete shift was the thing that made her lesser. Tonight, the person fate had chosen for her had confirmed her worst fear before everyone she knew. Then something moved through the forest. Mara lifted her head. Far beyond Cedar Hollow's boundary came a single howl, deeper than any wolf she had ever heard. Conversations behind her died instantly. Another answered from farther north. The rowan crescent grew unexpectedly warm against her fingers. Mara stared between the trees, listening as the forest fell silent again. She did not know what it called from the darkness. She only knew that on the night one wolf decided she was not worth choosing, something ancient had heard her pain. Mara did not sleep that night. By sunrise, the pain beneath her ribs had softened from something sharp into a deep, exhausting ache, the kind that made every ordinary task feel heavier than it should. June never asked her to explain it. She simply placed warm tea beside Mara at breakfast and sat across from her in companionable silence. That mercy nearly broke her more than Grant's rejection had. I keep wondering what I did wrong, Mara finally admitted. June's lined hands closed around her cup. Being unwanted by one person doesn't tell you who you are. Mara looked toward the window. Beyond their small cottage, Cedar Hollow was waking as though nothing had happened. She wished she could do the same. By late morning, she forced herself back to work. Avoiding the pack would only give yesterday more power over today. At the stables, however, conversation stopped when she entered. Some wolves offered awkward sympathy. Others watched with the fascination people reserved for public misfortune. Mara ignored both. She was carrying fresh linen toward the tack room when a violent crash shook the nearest stall. A chestnut warhorse reared behind the gate, eyes rolling, foam streaking its bit. A young stable hand had fallen against the wall, clutching his shoulder. "Stay back," someone shouted. Two men rushed forward with ropes, but the frightened animal kicked hard enough to splinter a wooden rail. Mara set down the linen. "Stop crowding him." One man glanced at her. "This isn't your concern." Another crack of wood answered him. Mara saw what they did not. The horse was not angry. He was terrified. She slipped through the opening before anyone could grab her. "Mara!" She lowered herself several feet from the trembling animal and kept her hands visible. No command. No attempt to seize the reins. She simply waited. The horse snorted, stamping once. "I know," she murmured. "Everyone keeps asking you to be less afraid before they'll stop frightening you." The words were meant for him. Perhaps some were meant for herself. His breathing gradually slowed. Mara extended one hand, but did not move closer. After a long moment, the horse crossed the distance himself and pressed his warm muzzle against her palm. The stable fell quiet. Mara stroked the bridge of his nose. "There you are." Behind her, someone muttered that it was luck. Mara almost smiled. Kindness was often called luck by people who had never learned patience. When she returned home that afternoon, June was waiting beside the garden gate with an expression that erased Mara's fragile calm. "Royal riders came through," she said. "King Everett Blackwood arrives tomorrow." Mara stopped. The Alpha King rarely visited minor territories without cause. Why Cedar Hollow? Something has been moving near the northern forest. Scouts found tracks. June hesitated. Very large ones. Mara's thoughts returned instantly to the howls after the ceremony. She touched the Rowan crescent beneath her collar. Did they say what made them? No, June studied her face. "And you are not going looking?" Despite everything, Mara gave a tired laugh. "I wasn't planning to." That evening, preparations consumed Cedar Hollow. Banners appeared along the main road. Grant organized patrols while Vanessa remained conspicuously near him, already behaving as though yesterday had settled her future. Mara stayed away from them. For the first time, she realized she did not need Grant to regret rejecting her. She needed to stop measuring herself by whether he ever would. Near dusk, she carried scraps behind the cottage for June's chickens and noticed something beside the fence. A print marked the damp soil. Mara crouched. It resembled a wolf track, except it was nearly twice the size of any she had seen. Her pulse quickened. She did not touch it. From the woods came the faint rustle of branches, followed by stillness. Mara slowly rose. Somewhere beyond the trees, something was watching Cedar Hollow. And tomorrow, the Alpha King was coming to discover what. By mid-morning, Cedar Hollow barely resembled the quiet pack Mara had known all her life. Royal banners lined the southern road. Guards watched every path leading north, and no one was permitted near the forest. Mara had told June about the enormous track beside their fence. Her grandmother had made her promise not to follow anything into those woods. Mara had promised easily. After the mating ceremony, she had no desire to be noticed by anything else. Near noon, horns sounded from the ridge. King Everett Blackwood arrived with 12 royal guards, Captain Caleb Pierce riding at his right and an older silver-haired man at his left. Wolves crowded the roadside to watch. Mara remained near the stable doors. She recognized Everett immediately. Dark hair, broad shoulders, a thin scar running from his right temple toward his cheekbone. He carried authority without performing it. Even Grant seemed younger when he stepped forward to deliver Cedar Hollow's formal welcome. "Your Majesty, it is our honor. Show me the tracks," Everett said. Grant's prepared smile disappeared. Within the hour, Everett, Caleb, and Elias Mercer, keeper of the royal archives, were examining prints along the northern boundary. Mara stayed behind. Kings investigated dangers. Rejected Omegas learned how to become invisible again. Then a hunting dog stumbled from the trees. Blood streaked one hind leg, and panic had turned the normally disciplined animal vicious. When a stable hand approached with rope, the dog snapped hard enough to send him backward. Pin him down, one royal guard ordered. Mara stepped from the supply shed. That will make it worse. Caleb turned. And you are? Grant answered before she could. Mara Whitcomb, an Omega from Cedar Hollow. Mara heard the familiar judgment hidden inside the introduction. Everett apparently heard it too. His gaze rested briefly on Grant before returning to her. You know the animal? No. Then why do you think he'll let you near him? Mara looked at the dog shaking beside the fence. I don't. That answer caught Everett's attention. Mara took clean cloth from a basket and crouched several feet away. She did not reach for the animal. She simply placed the cloth between them. You don't know me, she murmured. So I won't ask you to trust me before you're ready. The growling gradually weakened. After a long moment, the dog limped forward and touched its nose to her fingers. Mara waited another heartbeat before examining the wound. Everett watched the entire exchange. You never commanded him to lie down, he said when she finished wrapping the leg. Mara glanced up. He wasn't disobedient. He nearly bit a man. Because he was hurt and frightened. She stroked the dog once beneath its jaw. Fear doesn't become defiance just because someone stronger finds it inconvenient. Silence followed. Caleb looked toward his king. Everett's expression had become unreadable. And if patience had failed, he asked, then I would have backed away and tried something else. Mara stood. Trust stops being trust when the other side isn't allowed to say no. The words left her before she realized how personally she meant them. Grant stiffened. Everett looked from him to Mara, understanding enough not to ask. Thank you, Miss Whitcomb, he said. Not Omega. Not broken. Her name. Mara carried the bloody cloth away, unaware that Everett continued watching after she left. Later, inside Cedar Hollow's council lodge, Elias spread brittle drawings across a long table. Beside the fresh measurements lay an ancient image of enormous wolves beneath a crescent moon. No ordinary wolf made those tracks, Caleb said. Grant folded his arms. Rogues. Elias shook his head. The oldest records call them the first pack. Ancient wolves. They supposedly disappeared centuries ago. Everett studied the drawing. Supposedly. Elias tapped the measurements. Legends should not leave footprints. Before sunset, Everett closed the northern boundary completely. No hunter or patrol could enter without royal authorization. The decree had barely reached the cottages when a woman's scream tore through Cedar Hollow. Mara ran outside with June. A mother stumbled into the road barefoot, sobbing. Her 7-year-old son, Owen, was missing. Someone had last seen him following an injured deer toward the forbidden forest. Grant began gathering a search party, but at the mention of the northern boundary, several warriors hesitated. Mara stared toward the dark pines. Then she heard something beneath the rising wind. A child crying. Help me. She looked toward Grant's armed wolves, then toward the place none of them wanted to enter. Everett had asked her, what happened when patience failed? Now Mara faced a harder question. What happened when fear was reasonable, but someone needed you anyway? She stepped toward the forest. Mara crossed the meadow before she had time to question whether courage and foolishness sometimes were the same face. Behind her, Grant was ordering lanterns distributed while frightened voices argued over who would enter the northern forest. I heard him, Mara said. Grant caught her arm near the boundary marker. Heard who? Owen. He's inside. His grip tightened. You're not going anywhere. Mara looked at his hand until he released her. Yesterday, she might have obeyed simply because he spoke with an alpha certainty. Tonight, somewhere among those trees, a child was crying while stronger wolves debated the danger. His mother doesn't have time for us to be afraid. She took a lantern and stepped beneath the pines. Grant cursed and called after her, but Mara kept moving. Owen's cries came intermittently, weakened by distance. She followed them across wet roots and between towering trunks until Cedar Hollow's lights disappeared. Twice she found small footprints in the mud. Then she saw blood on a fern. Owen. Miss Mara. The answer came from a ravine ahead. She hurried down the slope and found the boy huddled beside a fallen cedar, one ankle scraped raw. Relief flooded his tear-streaked face. I couldn't find the way back. Mara crouched and checked him quickly. Can you stand? Owen nodded, then pointed behind the fallen trunk. It's hurt. A soft whimper reached her. Mara lifted the lantern. Beneath the cedar, pinned between two heavy branches, lay a wolf pup unlike any she had ever seen. Its coat was pale silver, threaded with darker gray along its spine, and one foreleg was trapped beneath the wood. Even young, it was unusually large. Mara's heartbeat stumbled. The enormous print beside June's fence flashed through her memory. I tried helping, Owen whispered. It snapped at me. You did the right thing by stopping. Mara should have taken the boy and left. Every warning from the last 2 days told her exactly that. Then the pup struggled, releasing a cry so frightened that something inside her refused to abandon it. She handed Owen the lantern. Stay behind me. Mara approached slowly. The pup bared small, sharp teeth. I'm not going to hurt you. She knelt beyond its reach and waited until its frantic breathing eased. Then she placed both hands beneath the lighter branch. When I lift this, you pull your paw free. Whether it understood her words or only her tone, the pup stopped fighting. Mara strained upward. Pain shot through her shoulders. The branch rose barely enough. The pup jerked free and collapsed. Mara lowered the wood, breathing hard, then tore a strip from the hem of her skirt and wrapped its injured leg. The pup stared at her with startling amber eyes. A branch snapped somewhere uphill. Mara spun, expecting Grant's search party. Nothing moved. Then another sound came from deeper in the forest. A low rumble. Not thunder. Owen grabbed her sleeve. Miss Mara. Between the trees, 2 amber lights appeared. Then another pair. And another. Mara's mouth went dry. Shapes moved beyond the lantern's reach, far larger than ordinary wolves. The rescued pup pressed against her knee instead of running toward them. Mara pulled Owen behind her and rose, though every instinct begged her to flee. Running would mean leaving the injured pup. It might also provoke whatever was watching. Don't move, she whispered. The nearest shape advanced just far enough for moonlight to catch a massive silver muzzle. Mara stopped breathing. Somewhere behind them, distant voices finally broke through the woods. Grant's search party. Then a sharper command followed, unmistakably Everett's, ordering everyone to hold formation. The creature before Mara turned toward the approaching voices. A growl rolled through the forest floor. More answered from every direction. Mara looked around and understood with sudden terror that the shapes were not gathering near her by accident. They were closing in. Yet before she could decide whether to call for Everett or remain silent, the injured pup leaned against her leg and released one small cry. Every growl stopped at once. The silence after the pup's cry felt more dangerous than the growling had. Mara stood with Owen behind her, and the injured animal pressed against her calf, while immense shapes waited beyond the lantern glow. Then Everett's voice carried through the trees. Mara. She turned just enough to see him 30 yards uphill with Caleb, Grant, Elias, and 6 armed wolves. Every blade was drawn. Everett's silver gaze moved from Owen to the pup, then to the creatures surrounding them. Bring the boy toward me. Slowly, Mara took Owen's hand. The nearest wolf stepped forward. It was enormous, silver gray, and scarred across one shoulder. Owen whimpered. Immediately, Caleb raised his sword. Don't, Mara said. Wickham moo. Grant snapped. Now. She almost did. Then the injured pup tried to follow and collapsed with a painful yelp. The silver-gray wolf's lips pulled back. 5 more shapes emerged from the darkness. Mara understood what the others could not see from uphill. If she abandoned the pup, or if anyone attacked, the fragile stillness would shatter. She crouched beside Owen. Can you be brave for 10 more seconds? His small face tightened. I think so. Good. Walk to the king. Don't run. Owen clung to her sleeve. You come too. Mara's heart squeezed. I will when it's safe. It was not quite a promise. She gently released his fingers. Owen began climbing. Everett stepped forward to meet him, refusing Caleb's attempt to move ahead. When the boy finally reached him, Everett placed Owen behind the royal line. Mara, he said, quieter now. Your turn. She looked down at the pup. Its amber eyes were fixed on her. I can't. Grant stared at her as if she had lost her mind. It's an animal. It's injured because Owen tried to help it. Then leave it to its own kind. Mara almost laughed at the bitter familiarity of those words. Leave the weak behind. Let someone else decide which life mattered enough to protect. Yesterday, she had stood beneath the mating arch while an entire pack accepted that reasoning about her. She could not repeat it now simply because she was frightened. No, Grant stepped down the slope. You don't get to be stubborn about this. Everett's arm shot across his path. Stay where you are. She's part of my pack. Everett turned his head, and she said no. Grant went still. Mara felt those words more deeply than Everett could have known. He had not ordered her. He had listened. Elias moved closer to the king, his attention fixed on the wolves. "Your Majesty," he murmured. "Look at their spacing." Everett did. The creatures were no longer scattered through the forest. They were taking positions. One moved behind Mara. Another crossed to her left. Two more emerged on her right, each larger than any natural wolf Everett had encountered. "They're forming a perimeter," Caleb said. "Around her," Elias corrected. Grant's face drained of color. "Then they're hunting her." Caleb lifted his sword again. "We can break the circle before it closes and start a fight with creatures we know nothing about." Everett asked. "No one moves without my command." Mara remained beside the pup as the final gap disappeared. There was no open path left to Everett. No route toward Cedar Hollow. Ancient wolves now stood on every side of her. The decision she had made for one wounded creature had placed her beyond every protection she had ever known. Then the wolves began shifting aside. Something was coming through their ranks. Elias inhaled sharply. A massive white wolf emerged beneath the moonlight, silver threaded through her coat, an old scar crossing her muzzle. Even the other ancient wolves lowered their heads as she passed. "What is that?" Grant whispered. Elias did not answer. He seemed to have forgotten how. The white wolf entered the circle and stopped directly before Mara. Caleb tightened both hands around his sword. Everett took one deliberate step forward. "Mara, whatever happens, do not run." Mara could hear her own heartbeat. The white wolf stared into her eyes, then glanced at the bandage tied around the pup's injured leg. For several unbearable seconds, neither of them moved. Mara expected teeth, a snarl, some sign that she had made a terrible mistake by staying. None came. Instead, something in the ancient creature's posture changed. Everett saw it. Elias saw it too. His face emptied of color. "Your Majesty," he whispered. Everett never looked away from Mara. "What?" Elias could barely answer. "I don't know." Around them, every ancient wolf became perfectly still. The first mother took one slow step closer to the rejected Omega. And before any alpha in that forest could understand what was happening, the ancient creature prepared to do something none of them had ever seen. The white wolf lowered her head. Mara waited for the strike that never came. Instead, the enormous creature bent her forelegs and slowly sank toward the earth. Her scarred muzzle dipped beneath Mara's trembling hand. Then she turned her head and exposed her throat. No one in the forest moved. Everett had seen defeated alphas bare their necks after combat. He had watched commanders kneel before his throne and challengers surrender rather than die beneath his claws. But Mara had conquered nothing. She carried no weapon. She had issued no command. She was simply standing beside an injured pup with a strip torn from her own skirt wrapped around its leg. A second ancient wolf stepped into the moonlight. It lowered its head. Grant's lips parted. "What?" Before he could finish, a third wolf folded its massive body toward the ground. Then another. Across the clearing, gray backs descended between the trees until only one creature remained standing. Mara turned slowly toward it. The last wolf stared at her for a long heartbeat. Then it bowed. An entire circle of ancient wolves had lowered themselves before the rejected Omega of Cedar Hollow. Mara heard someone behind Everett whisper a prayer. Caleb's sword gradually dipped toward the ground. Grant looked as though the world had rearranged itself while he was still trying to understand the old one. And Everett, the Alpha King before whom every living alpha in the Northern Territories was required to bow, could only stare. These creatures were older than his crown. Older, perhaps, than the laws that had given men like him authority over wolves like Mara. Yet none of them had bowed to him. They had chosen her. "Elias," Everett said at last. The archivist did not respond. His face had gone pale. "Elias." The older man removed his spectacles with unsteady fingers. "I have seen this drawn once." "Where?" "A damaged record beneath the original royal archives. Most of the text was missing. I thought the illustration was ceremonial." His gaze traveled around the lowered wolves. "I was wrong." Grant found his voice. "They're submitting to her." "No," Elias answered so quickly that everyone looked at him. That is what later Alpha scholars assumed. But the oldest surviving language never calls it submission. He swallowed. "It calls this the first bow." Everett looked again at Mara. "What does it mean?" "I can't tell you yet." Elias's frustration was unmistakable. "The record is incomplete. I know only that no surviving account describes a living alpha witnessing it. Mara barely heard them. The white wolf had lifted her amber eyes without raising her body. She was waiting, not demanding, waiting. Mara remembered the terrified warhorse crossing the stable because she had allowed him to choose. The wounded hunting dog approaching only after she stopped trying to close the distance. The pup remaining beside her now when its own kind surrounded them. Slowly, Mara raised one hand. "Don't," Grant said. She stopped. For years, that voice had carried enough weight to change what she did. Tonight it did not. Mara looked at Everett. Every line of his body warned that he wanted her away from danger. Still, he did not command her. "Your choice," he said. Mara turned back and extended her palm. The white wolf rose just enough to cross the remaining distance. Her forehead settled against Mara's hand. Warmth moved through Mara's fingers. No burst of magic came. No hidden power awakened. There was only trust, and somehow that hurt more beautifully than magic could have. Tears blurred Mara's vision. The wolves her world called savage had offered what her own mate had withheld. Acceptance without first demanding she become something else. Beneath her collar, the Rowan crescent suddenly warmed. The white wolf lifted her muzzle toward it. Elias noticed immediately. "Mara, your pendant." She covered it instinctively. "It was my mother's." Elias stared at the crescent, recognition beginning to disturb his features. "Your mother's?" Before Mara could answer, the first mother rose. Every ancient wolf stood with her. Then she walked toward the northern darkness, stopped between two towering pines, and looked back at Mara. The pack separated behind her, opening a path deeper into forbidden territory. Caleb's hand tightened around his lowered sword. "They want her to follow." Elias remained focused on the pendant, searching his memory. There was something after the first bow. I could never translate the passage because almost all of it was destroyed. Everett turned sharply. "Something?" Elias nodded. Only one word survived intact. The first mother gave a low call from the darkness. Everett's voice hardened. "What word?" Elias looked at Mara, then at the waiting path. "Choosing." No one knew what it meant. Not even Elias. And as the ancient wolves waited for Mara's answer, she understood that whatever had begun with the first bow was not finished yet. The path between the ancient wolves remained open, but Mara did not step into it. The first mother waited beneath the pines, watching her. So did everyone else. Grant finally broke the silence. "You're not actually considering this." Mara looked at the dark passage, then at the injured pup beside her. "I don't know what I'm considering." "Then we leave." Grant reached for her arm. Mara moved away before he could touch her. "Stop deciding for me." The words were quiet, but they landed harder than a shout. Grant froze. Everett said nothing. He simply watched Mara reclaim the space between them. Elias opened the brass case beneath his coat and removed the folded fragment of parchment he had brought from the royal archives. "There is one passage I kept returning to," he said. "I thought the tracks might finally help me understand it." He unfolded the damaged page beneath the moonlight. The translation was wrong. Caleb frowned. "Wrong how?" Elias traced a faded line. Later Alpha scholars interpreted the first bow as submission because they assumed every hierarchy required someone to rule it. He looked toward the waiting wolves. But the older language says something else. When the first ones bow, seek not the hand that rules them. They bow before the heart that commands nothing. Grant gave a bitter laugh. "Convenient. She commands nothing. Because she is nothing." The first mother's head snapped toward him. A warning growl rolled through the trees. Grant went silent. Mara did not feel vindicated. She felt tired. "And the choosing?" Everett asked. Elias looked down at the ruined lower portion of the parchment. "Most of that passage is gone. I still don't know what the word means." He carefully followed one surviving line with his finger. "But this much is explicit. Whatever the choosing is, it fails the moment acceptance is forced." Everett's gaze settled on Mara. "Then no one here will force it." A sharp mechanical click cut through the clearing. Mara turned. One of Grant's frightened searchers had raised a crossbow toward the first mother. "Put it down," Everett ordered. The man's hands shook. "Your Majesty, it's going to attack." The bolt fired. Everything happened at once. The injured pup stepped forward. Mara saw the trajectory and lunged, pulling the small wolf against her chest. The bolt struck the earth beside her knee. Ancient wolves surged upright. Snarls exploded through the forest. Caleb drew his sword. Royal steel flashed behind him. Grant's men reached for their weapons. Everett's hand closed around his own blade. One command could turn fear into slaughter. Then he saw Mara kneeling inside the circle. She was protecting the pup with her body, but she was looking at him, not asking him to conquer the danger, asking him not to become it. Everett slowly released his sword. Weapons down. Caleb stared at him. Your Majesty, if they charge. Everett unbuckled his sword belt and placed the weapon on the forest floor. Then they will meet me without steel in my hand. Caleb's expression changed. After one painful hesitation, he lowered his blade. The royal guards followed. Grant did not. This is madness. Everett faced him. No, this is trust. Grant looked toward the wolves surrounding them. They're animals, and we are the ones who fired first. Grant's jaw tightened. At last, his sword dropped beside Everett's. The forest became quiet again. The first mother approached the searcher who had released the bolt. He stumbled backward, terrified. Mara set the pup down and rose. She could have remained silent. This was the man who had nearly killed her. No one would have blamed her. She stepped between them anyway. Please. The first mother stopped. Mara did not command her. She lowered her hand and waited. Seconds passed. Then the great wolf turned away from the trembling man. Elias stared at Mara, then down at the broken parchment. His eyes widened as the surviving words finally made sense. That was the choosing. Mara looked at him. What? Not following them into the forest. Wonder roughened his voice. Choosing what you would do once their trust gave you power. The first mother returned to Mara and pressed her forehead once against her palm. Then the ancient wolves began withdrawing among the trees. Everett watched them disappear and understood what no throne had ever taught him. Peace created by fear lasted only until someone stronger arrived. Mara had been given every reason to let vengeance happen, and had chosen mercy instead. Dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky when they returned to Cedar Hollow. The entire pack waited beyond the gates. June stood near the front, one hand pressed to her mouth. Vanessa was beside her. Grant slowed, staring toward the home where his word had once defined Mara's place. Mara kept walking. June reached her first and wrapped both arms around her. Over her grandmother's shoulder, Mara saw the crowd part without being ordered. Everett stopped beside her but did not take her hand. What happens now? He asked quietly. Mara looked at the mating arch visible beyond the houses, the place where this journey had begun. Then she looked at the wolves who had once believed Grant's rejection told them everything they needed to know about her. Now, she said, they learn it didn't. And for the first time, Cedar Hollow had to face Mara without the comfort of believing she was the one who should be ashamed. Mara entered Cedar Hollow beside June, not behind Grant, not beneath Everett's protection, but on her own feet. The ancient wolves stopped beyond the gates, silent among the mourning trees. Their presence changed the way people looked at her, yet Mara noticed something painful in that sudden respect. Yesterday, they had avoided her because Grant had rejected her. Today, they moved aside because creatures from legend had bowed. Neither response had asked who she actually was. Grant approached before the gathering could disperse. Vanessa stood several paces behind him, her confidence gone. Mara, wait. She turned. Grant swallowed. What happened out there changes things. Does it? I didn't know what you were. Mara's expression softened, though not in the way he hoped. That was always the problem, Grant. You thought you needed to know what I was before deciding whether I deserved kindness. His face tightened. I made a mistake. You did. No cruelty sharpened her answer. But I don't need you punished for it. And I don't need you to choose me now. Grant lowered his eyes, the same way he had after rejecting her. This time, Mara felt no bond tearing inside her. Only a door closing gently. Vanessa stepped forward next. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she removed the pale blue ceremonial ribbon still tied around her wrist. I liked being the woman he preferred, she admitted. And I let that make me enjoy what happened to you. She placed the ribbon in her pocket. I'm sorry. Mara studied her. Then the next time someone is standing where I stood, don't join the crowd. Vanessa nodded once. It was not friendship. It was something smaller, perhaps more useful, accountability. Everett had been listening from a respectful distance. He turned to Grant and the Cedar Hollow elders. The rejection ceremony followed your law. The humiliation surrounding it did not violate one. Elder Warren looked uncertain. No, Your Majesty. Then your law is incomplete. By midday, Everett summoned the council inside the meeting hall. Mara expected to be asked for testimony. Instead, he pulled out an empty chair beside his own. If rules concerning Omegas are being rewritten, an Omega should be present when we write them. Grant's father objected first. With respect, Your Majesty, she has no council rank. Everett did not raise his voice. That is exactly why she needs the chair. Mara sat. Hours followed. Public rejection would no longer permit ridicule, forced spectacle, or punishment of the rejected mate. Omegas could petition outside their pack leadership when mistreated. Rank would no longer determine access to healers or protection. Everett rejected harsher proposals from Caleb that would have stripped Cedar Hollow of authority entirely. Fear can make people obey, he said, glancing once toward Mara. It cannot teach them better. When the council finally ended, evening had colored the windows gold. June waited outside with Mara's coat. Your mother would have liked seeing you in that room, she said. Mara touched the Rowan crescent beneath her collar. Elias noticed this in the forest. June's smile faded. He asked whether Mother ever knew anything about the ancient wolves. June looked toward the northern hills. She knew very little. Only that while carrying you, she sometimes heard howling from places where no wolves were supposed to live. Mara waited for more, but June shook her head. Whatever they recognized in you, sweetheart, I don't think your mother wanted it to become a burden. Nearby, Everett had heard enough to understand. He approached without his guards. Elias leaves for the Royal Archives tomorrow. He intends to study the pendant and the oldest records. Mara searched his face. And what do you intend? To return to the capital. A pause. There is work there that began in this hall. He offered her a sealed invitation rather than an order. I would like you involved. Not because the ancient wolves bowed to you. Because you spoke when everyone else had become accustomed to silence. Mara accepted the letter but did not open it. Beyond the gates, a long white shape appeared briefly between the pines. The first mother watched her, then turned north. Mara looked down at Everett's invitation. For the first time, leaving Cedar Hollow would not mean being cast out. It would mean choosing where her life went next. 3 weeks later, Mara Whitcomb arrived at Blackwood Palace carrying one suitcase, her mother's Rowan crescent, and Everett's invitation folded inside her coat. No guards had been sent to collect her. No royal decree required her presence. She had left Cedar Hollow because she chose. 2. That mattered more than anyone at the palace could have understood. Elias met her inside the Royal Archives with his brass case open across a long oak table. Beside several restored parchments lay a charcoal drawing of the same crescent Mara wore around her neck. I found your mother's family, he said. Mara sat opposite him. Were they alphas? No, Elias smiled faintly. That was the mistake scholars kept making. We searched royal bloodlines because we assumed the ancient wolves would recognize royalty. He turned the oldest page toward her. Your ancestors were keepers. Long before alpha territories divided the north, keepers tended the border paths between settlements and the lands of the first pack. They treated injured wolves, returned lost pups, and protected the passages without claiming ownership of them. Rowan crescents identified their families. Mara touched her pendant. Then the first mother bowed because she recognized this? She noticed it, Elias corrected. That is not why she bowed. He pointed to a faded line beneath the drawing. The token could tell them where you came from. Only your choices could tell them who you had become. Mara went still. The frightened warhorse. The wounded hunting dog. Owen. The trapped pup. Even the terrified man whose crossbow had nearly killed her. None of those moments had felt like tests. There's one more line, Elias said. His voice softened as he translated. A keeper does not make the wild kneel. A keeper leaves it free enough to come closer. Mara's eyes burned. Suddenly her mother's gift felt different against her skin. Not an inheritance of power. A reminder of how power should be held. June had once told her that Mara's mother heard impossible howls while carrying her. Now Mara understood why. The ancient wolves had remembered the keepers long after the packs had forgotten them. But memory had only drawn their attention. Mara herself had earned their trust. In the weeks that followed, she joined representatives from 6 territories as Everett expanded the Cedar Hollow reforms. She refused a royal title. Instead, she fought for Omega seats on regional councils, independent hearings for abuse, complaints, and equal access to healers regardless of rank. Everett did not simply approve her proposals. He questioned them, challenged them, and made the council hear her answers. Then he backed the laws when the room resisted. Letters came from home. Vanessa had begun helping June prepare younger Omegas for mating ceremonies so none would stand alone if rejected. Grant sent one letter. He had temporarily stepped away from succession duties. He did not ask Mara to return or forgive him. He wrote only that he had confused being chosen to lead with being entitled to decide what other people were worth. Mara folded the letter and put it away without anger. By early autumn, the reforms had begun taking effect across the north. One evening, Everett asked Mara to walk beyond the palace gardens. At the edge of an open field, he stopped. For once, the Alpha King looked uncertain. Mara, I don't want to claim you. Months earlier, those words might have reopened an old wound. Now she simply waited. I want to court you, he continued. If you permit it. And if your answer ever becomes no, your work, your place here, and my respect remain yours. Mara looked at the man who had once believed strength meant control. In the forest, he had put down his sword before asking anyone else to lower theirs. Now he was doing the same thing without steel. You may court me, she said. Everett exhaled. Mara smiled. Slowly. I was afraid you'd say that. A deep howl rolled across the hills. Ancient wolves appeared along the ridge, silver shapes gathering beneath the evening sky. The first mother descended alone. Palace guards watched from a distance, their weapons remaining sheathed under Everett's standing order. Mara walked forward. The great white wolf stopped before her and lowered her head in the first bow. Mara placed a hand against her scarred forehead. Then the first mother turned toward Everett. For a moment, King and Ancient Wolf regarded one another. Everett could have remained standing. No law required anything else. No one asked him to move. Instead, he stepped beside Mara, lowered his head, and bowed first. The first mother did not bow back. She touched her muzzle, briefly to his shoulder. It was enough. When Everett straightened, Mara slipped her hand into his. On the night Grant rejected her, Mara had believed being unchosen meant being unworthy. The ancient wolves had surrounded her only to reveal what no alpha had understood. True strength did not force devotion, demand submission, or decide another soul's value. It made room for choice. And beneath the fading light, Mara finally understood why this ending could never have been about becoming powerful enough to make the world kneel. She had remained gentle enough to teach a king when to bow.